Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Taking Charge of Your Health. We apologize for being a little late. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, so please keep us in your prayers. I'm Dr. Christina Wells, and I'm the Health and Wellness Director for the Lake Region Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. On behalf of our president, Dr. R. Clifford Jones, our executive secretary, Pastor Garth Gabriel, our treasurer, Elder Yvonne Collins, our vice president for multilingual affairs, Pastor Eduardo Allen, and our ministerial director, Pastor Michael Horton. Again, I welcome you today. We have an exciting presentation ahead of us where we're going to learn how to have mental wellness with natural approaches. I guarantee you this speaker is knowledgeable in this area that he's going to be speaking about today, and you're going to be blessed with all of the information that he's going to provide. A little bit about Dr. Neil Netley. He is the founder and medical director of the community-based and residential Netley Depression and Anxiety Recovery Programs. Dr. Netley is an award-winning practicing physician who also serves as president of Weimar Institute. He has presented and published numerous scientific studies in the medical literature and is well known as an international public speaker and teacher. He is author of Proof Positive Depression, The Way Out, The Lost Art of Thinking, and Optimize Your Brain. He hosts the annual Emotional Intelligence Summit with global speakers and participants. And I can tell you, I've been a participant for a few years, and it has been awesome. He is currently an adjunct clinical professor of medicine at Loma Linda University and serves on the constituency of Loma Linda University and the corporate board of Andrews University. Dr. Netley and his wife Erica have 4 sons. He enjoys hiking in nature with his family, piloting his own aircraft, snow skiing, and listening to sacred and classical music. Nothing is as enjoyable to Dr. Netley, however, as helping people from the depths of depression and anxiety to the pinnacle of success and fulfillment. We welcome you today, Dr. Netley, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we start this presentation, I'm just going to have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, thank you for the Sabbath day. Thank you for the information that we are going to receive. We ask that you would bless the presenter and his presentation. Open our ears to receive what is to come our way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Netley, for joining us today.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Can you hear me?
But I will assume that you can. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully you'll be able to see that as well. I'm sorry, for whatever reason, I don't think I can hear everyone on the program right now, so I'm hoping we're not having technical difficulties.
I can hear you.
But we will be speaking about effective approaches in eradicating depression and anxiety. And a Gallup poll of Americans was recently taken during the COVID epidemic, and it showed that Americans state their COVID is adversely affecting their mental health even worse than it's affecting them physically or financially. This crisis has produced even worsening mental health conditions. 1/3 admit to having depression and anxiety, but if you take a look at the real data, it's actually over half. Emotional well-being is being attacked at a stronger rate than ever before in human history, according to Gallup. And of course, I'm going to go over to the other screen to make sure that Can you hear me now? Sorry. I'll go back to the screen. The diagnostic hallmark symptoms of major depression: deep sadness and emptiness, apathy, increased irritability, psychomotor retardation, increase or decrease in weight or appetite, sleep disturbances, decrease in focus and concentration, fatigue. You don't have to have all of these symptoms, but if you have um, maybe 3 of these symptoms, or 4 or 5, that can qualify as major depression. And it will be severe major depression if you might also have feelings of worthlessness and morbid thoughts. Those are bolded because any of those symptoms would indicate a severe major depression symptomatology. So 5 or more of those 9, major depression, 2 to 4 minor, unless it includes 8 or 9, which of course that would put it into depression regardless. Anxiety disorders are even more common than depression, and includes feeling on edge and racing thoughts. And there's a number of anxiety disorders such as PTSD, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, social phobias, panic, and anxiety also tends to produce a host of physical symptoms such as chest pain, shortness of breath, rapid heart rate, gastrointestinal distress, even nausea and pain. And so if we look at all the anxiety disorders, they're even more common than just major depression alone, but the single most common disorder is major depression. And of course, these have gotten worse under COVID. If we take a look at 16 to 24-year-old girls.
Dr. Netley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm sorry. We can't see your screen. So I apologize. I had to exit because I was having some issues with my technology. Can you, on your your presentation, can you go to your full screen presentation now?
Yes, I mean, that's what I was doing, I thought. Let me see. Can I just toggle back to the full screen? That's what I...
Yeah, go back to the full screen of
Yeah.
click on your presentation.
Okay. Does that work now?
No. Exit your browser and then exit the share screen and then come back in and share again.
Okay. I'll go ahead and do that. Were you ever able to see it or no?
No.
Okay. So we'll stop the screen.
Okay, now try to share again. But make sure you're not in full screen. So exit full screen now before you start to share.
Okay. I just exited the full screen.
Okay, now try to share and you'll see your presentation will pop up on your screen, and then so share, and then when you see your presentation, click on it.
Okay.
So you see did you click on your presentation?
I have now. Can
Okay.
you see anything now? Let me go back to that. Share screen.
And then before you click on it, it'll show you like you should see your presentation in the background, and you'll click on your presentation. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then there we go. There we go. I see it now. There it is. Okay. So now you can click on your presentation.
Okay.
Praise the Lord. We're working through this. So then go to, you can go to like slideshow now.
Yes, I have. Can you see the slideshow?
But we see like all your notes and everything.
Okay, let me see. why that's the case. Now, can you see the full screen?
No, go back to full screen, see if that helps.
I am on full screen now.
Okay, so we might, hold on, let me click it out in. No, we can still just only, did you go to, is this PowerPoint?
It is, yeah.
So did you go to the top where it says start the slideshow?
I can do that. Let's see, slideshow.
And then go to
From current
the
slide.
start, or yeah, from current start. Yes, go there.
Okay, I'm on it.
Now, did you click it?
Yes.
Okay, go from the start. Click from the start and see if that helps.
All right, let me go back and click it from the start.
Okay. Well, we'll just do it like this. We'll be able to see your slides on the back, but at least now we can see your slides. Thank you.
Oh, you can't see it? So
We can see them now, but we can also see your outline.
I see. Okay. Well, if you can see them, that's great.
Yes.
Let me just see. But if I go full screen, you can't. Is that right?
No, if you go full,
Because right now I'm going full screen.
Okay, we can still see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
So here are the 9 symptoms of depression. We went over some of the anxiety things already. And I wanted to go over a recent study. Well, actually, it's several years ago, but it's looking at 16 to 24-year-old girls back all the way to 1993. The proportion of the population reporting self-harm, 1% in 1993. Every 7 years, they've evaluated it, 2% in 2000, 4% in 2007, and 26% in 2014. That's more than exponential. And these are individuals who are cutting or doing other ways of self-harm. It's now 1/4 of the population, in fact, above that, because we're now 2021 and we're going to get a repeat analysis now among this age group. And this is just showing us how mental health issues are skyrocketing. And it's not only in the US, but other Western nations as well. It's so common that there's only 2 categories of people: those who have a mental disorder, or those who know someone with a mental disorder. It's so common that you would have to know someone with a mental disorder if you don't have one yourself. Of course, the most common treatment in Western civilizations is pharmacotherapy or drugs. But a lot of people don't realize that these drugs have their limitations, and the number needed to treat to see a significant benefit in one patient is 7 or 8 patients. This is not something that is significant. I mean, it is significant enough that it's still used. As a doctor, I might still use pharmacotherapy as well. But you can see it's very limited as far as its effects. 2 out of 3 will have side effects, and 1 out of 20 will stop their medication due to the severe side effects. The benefit is more prominent, however, as the severity increases. But like other classes, these most commonly used drugs, called the SSRIs and the SNRIs, don't help patients synthesize more neurotransmitters or increase the neurotransmitter receptors. They can actually deplete the neurons of neurotransmitters long term due to their primary effects of plugging the reuptake channels. That's why they're called reuptake inhibitors. They're actually preventing these neurotransmitters from being reuptaked by the neuron that released it. And it's doing that because there's a shortage in those neurons to begin with, to try to get more of those neurotransmitters in the synapse. But the long-term effect is actually making even less of these neurotransmitters.
Dr. Nelly, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again. Can you go to mirror show? I don't think your slides are advancing. So at the top where it says mirror show, can you go there?
Okay, let me
mirror
see.
show. At the across the toolbar at the top where it says, go to mirror show next to presenter view.
Yeah, that's great.
Click on that for me.
All right. Yep. And let's see if that will do it. Can you see it advancing now?
Yes, it's click on presenter view. I'm sorry. They told me to tell you click on presenter view.
Okay, presenter view.
Yeah.
Let me see if that'll work.
Mm,
Can you see the data populating the slide?
yeah, it's on the pharmacotherapy slide.
Yeah, and does the last line say can deplete neurons of neurotransmitters long term?
Right. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So these drugs frequently cause I don't care attitudes. And a lot of people actually like that effect because they're having crying spells and they're feeling so bad that they actually welcome an I don't care attitude because it causes them to not have to cry so much or to feel their bad emotions, but it also blunts them from feeling good emotions. And in addition, these drugs worsen impulsivity before the depression improves. That's why they all have black box warnings, because if someone with severe depression, you add impulsivity to it, that can increase their risk of suicide. And that's why they have to be monitored very closely. So you can see with these type of effects why it's so important for us to look for non-medication and lifestyle therapies for depression. In addition, these antidepressants cause sexual problems. 72% will have an inability to climax. Weight gain is common, and a numbness with a decrease in their empathy for others. 36% will actually get suicidal, and people who use antidepressants have a higher risk of heart attacks and strokes, as well as a greater overall mortality, showing that these agents don't actually improve physical health. They also can increase the risk of dementia, osteoporosis, and breast cancer. And the relapse rates are high if you do improve with them. If you happen to be one out of the 7 or 8 that do dramatically improve with these medicines, you're going to have a high likelihood of relapse within a year because you're depleting the neurons of the very substance. And so the doses are having to be adjusted, increased, more medicines are having to be used, and basically a psychiatric cripple results where the patient is needing to see doctors on a frequent basis to continue to adjust and add to medicines. And if we take a look at their scores still indicate severe depression in many instances. So what we want to do is affect what's going on in this synapse, and we want to affect it by helping us to make more of the tryptophan above.
Dr. Nettle, your slides are not advancing. I'm sorry. I don't know. Are you manually advancing them?
Yeah,
I can't see them advancing for some reason on our side.
I see. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what to do. Maybe how about this? Can you see this?
Did you play the slideshow?
I am.
Okay, so can you try advancing again and see if it advances?
Can you see the slide now?
I can see the slide. It's not very clear, but I can see the slide. Can you try advancing?
So yeah, I'll have to put it back into slide view, but I'm wondering, let me look, slideshow. Let me do play from current slide. Can you see that? You see it advancing and it being populated?
No.
No. Okay, perhaps we could just do it this way, where I just click on this, because you are able to see this, right?
Right.
I know it's not big and it's not full screen, but whenever I go full screen, apparently it doesn't advance anymore.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we'll just stick with this. So if you see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, probably not, but serotonin is being released in response to an electrical transmission. And when it's picked up on the receptor, that's when communication occurs in the brain. And then it's released from the receptor and vacuumed back up for further usage. But if we're blocking these things on the side, which is what the drugs are doing, we're allowing more serotonin to be present here in the synapse, but less serotonin in the neuron above, meaning that eventually we're going to deplete the neuron of the very substance we're trying to treat. And once again, this is why non-pharmaceutical approaches are so key in treating this disease. Fortunately, we have now shown that mental health education is superior to usual care in treating depression and anxiety. And that's what you can do in your local church by putting on a depression and anxiety recovery program. That's what could be done in physicians' offices or mental health clinics, because mental health education can help people so that they know what to do to increase the amount of tryptophan that they're actually making, or picking up the receptors, more receptors, which is something that the pharmaceuticals just can't do. So there are over 100 potential causes of clinical depression and or anxiety disorders that can be categorized into 10 categories. And if 4 or more of these 10 categories are active, depression and or anxiety disorder will very often result, no matter what the background, no matter what the person. And the more categories involved, the more severe the depression and anxiety tends to be. So our goal is to find the active causes and eliminate those reversible causes, and that can effectively help in treating depression and anxiety. So it's also important to recognize the symptoms that are related to the neurotransmitters, so we know which neurotransmitters might be involved in a shortage or an excess of that could be causing the problem. For instance, lack of serotonin activity is going to likely result in these type of symptoms: feeling down, being more irritable. In other words, the usual nuisances of life tick you off more. Insomnia, early morning awakening where we're not able to go back to sleep. Feelings of panic can occur and feeling on edge. These individuals are characterized by a calm exterior but a tense interior, and a tendency for more obsessions when they're short in serotonin. Impulsivity can be worse, and their executive function can be worse because serotonin is used extensively in the frontal lobe. And when we don't have enough, our frontal lobe abilities start to go down. Serotonin is, when we have enough of it, it's easier to empathize with others. We can be more naturally empathetic. People with adequate serotonin will be less self-centered. They'll also be more creative and artistic, and even musical skills come easier for them. Their impulsivity will get better and their executive function will get better as serotonin activity increases. And in general, they make great neighbors and great workmates and great family members when they have enough of this around and enough activity occurring where it's binding to the receptor. So those symptoms are helpful because that can help us to know how to direct our nutrition and lifestyle therapy. And I should mention that if we go back to the screen here, in order to make serotonin, we have to have tryptophan in the brain. Tryptophan comes into the brain by, of course, being in the bloodstream, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier by diffusion. It has to have a carrier in an insulin-mediated mechanism. This is why we always have to have carbs with tryptophan to get tryptophan into the brain to make the serotonin. And if that's an issue, then we're going to want to know which foods are going to be the best as far as tryptophan uptake for the brain. So going into another neurotransmitter that's often a problem is lack of dopamine. When we're not having enough dopamine activity, things that used to be pleasurable are no longer pleasurable. Motivation will be down. If we don't have healthy motivation, it's a dopamine problem. If we wake up in the morning and we're not excited about the day, but we get up out of a sense of duty and responsibility, that's a dopamine issue. Weight gain can also occur, but it might be a low appetite depending if whether you have high norepinephrine or not. And then people that are short in dopamine tend to turn to false ways to get dopamine surges. So they're much more prone to addictions, for instance. And they're much more prone to turning to things like marijuana, alcohol, and even sex, pornography, and utilizing their libido to try to produce these dopamine surges. Norepinephrine is another important neurotransmitter. We want enough of it, but not too much. If we don't have enough, we'll get fatigued and lack of focus and our memory decline, and we might be sleeping too much. Depression and anxiety is not always associated with insomnia. Sometimes it's associated with sleeping way too much and wanting to sleep all the time, and that can be a sign of norepinephrine shortage. Too much norepinephrine, however, can be associated with excessive worry, being easily distracted like ADHD, racing thoughts. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder also occurs when norepinephrine is high and dopamine is low. And weight loss can also occur where you're losing too much weight and having anorexia as well. So it is important to recognize the constellation of symptoms and what neurotransmitters can be involved to help us best in regards to where is the best bang for the buck in regards to lifestyle factors. So briefly going over the 10 categories of causes, one of the causes is genetic causes. And some people have genetics that actually are associated with undermethylation, where they have a problem producing that final step, which is adding a methyl group to form serotonin and dopamine to begin with. And if that's the case, we might need to help them with nutritional supplements like S-adenosylmethionine or or saffron, for instance. Saffron has been shown to help us with serotonin release as well as with the receptor level. And so knowing some of the genetics can be helpful. And of course, in our residential program, we're measuring those genetics. We can even see if the gene is active or not and can precisely treat the condition from in a nutritional standpoint so that the mutated gene is no longer having any effect. Adverse childhood experiences, of course, can also be significant causes. And if this is part of the contributing cause, this is where counseling comes in regards to helping the individual to realize where the blind spots are and the scarring are from these adverse childhood experiences and how best to recover from those. Lifestyle causes are also prominent. Lack of physical fitness. By the way, lack of physical fitness has significantly increased under COVID. People are afraid to go outdoors, thinking that they're going to somehow come across COVID. And so people have not been going to gyms as well. And so exercise seems to be at an all-time low, but physical fitness actually helps our brain health even more than it helps our body health. And it actually helps us to make more of these neurotransmitters and build up more of the receptors. Fresh air is very helpful for the brain. Something that we call forest bathing, where we actually are breathing in products, these particularly oil products, what we call essential oils from the trees, can actually enhance mood and help our brain to work better. Light therapy is also something very important for us to be able to make enough serotonin in the daytime and enough melatonin at night. Then there are circadian rhythm causes. Screens in the evening actually throw off our circadian rhythm. We keep wanting to go to bed later and we keep being more tired in the morning. Screens, particularly the hour before bedtime, is not a good thing. And we are in a world that's been enraptured and infatuated with screens. And a lot of people on their off time are just staring at screens. And this is adversely affecting their circadian rhythm and their sleep issue. Now, if you're going to use screens, it would be much better in the morning and none in the evening. And so it's best when you get home to do things that are not related to screens. The best circadian rhythm production for both serotonin and melatonin is actually early to bed, early to rise. So it'd be better to go to bed early and not choose to go into the screens. And that actually was shown to be better than Prozac in getting rid of negative thoughts. Then there are addiction causes. The reason why addictions can cause depression is because it lowers our dopamine set point. When we're continually doing things to produce dopamine surges, which is what addictions are about, our dopamine receptors start to go down. And so over time, our enjoyment of life, we become very dysphoric, feeling a deep, distressing sense of deprivation, even though there's nothing bad going on in our life. And then we do the addiction just to get numb. So first people do it to get high, but the more they do it, the less high they get. And pretty soon they're doing it just to feel neutral or numb. And this is why it often requires a program, a community program or a residential program to help the person be able to overcome those addictions, to lay off those dopamine surges, to have accountability, and then also do things that will help them be able to make dopamine naturally, such as exercise and nutrition. And of course, speaking of nutrition, that's a whole nother set of causes. As this prestigious journal in psychiatry stated, diet is as important to psychiatry as it is to cardiology, gastroenterology, and endocrinology. Nutritional medicine should now be considered as a mainstream element of psychiatric practice. The research is so clear that simple nutritional changes can produce effects even superior to any medication out there, because it's getting to the root of the problem of not being able to make enough of these neurotransmitters, that it should be considered mainstream. If your doctor doesn't know about nutrition in the brain and how it can help depression and anxiety, they're really not up to date. They are, if they're just reaching for medications which have all those side effects without working on these other things, this is another reason why you might choose to go to a mental health program that might be run in your local church or run in your community, because that can work far better than traditional approaches. Then there are toxic causes. Mercury is one of them from eating too much fish, lead, cadmium, other toxins. But a toxin that's emerging, it's not really a toxin because in small amounts it's helpful to us. It's copper. But we're finding out a lot of people have excess free copper in combination with what they're eating and their genetics. Copper is present a lot in seafood, which has been shown to increase the risk of depression. It's also present in seaweed, and for those that don't have enough ceruloplasmin, that can also be a source of depression. And so we get rid of excess copper by giving more zinc. This is one of the reasons why zinc has been shown to be very beneficial in treating depression, because it can help us get rid of the excess copper and also help us in regards to building up more receptors for our neurotransmitters. An eighth underlying cause is social and stress causes. Relational trauma is up there near the top. And of course, with the political trauma going on in our society as well, that would also fit under these social and stress causes. And so it's very important when you're in these modes. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy is important. And our community program, as well as our residential program, we teach cognitive behavioral therapy to help us through these social and stress-related causes and help our brain not to suffer as a result of some of these things that are going on in our life. And it all has to do with thinking rational thoughts and helpful thoughts, which is what cognitive behavioral therapy is all about. And then finally, there's medical causes. There might be autoimmune disease. It might be head concussion, might be high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol. All of these have a role in regards to potentially exacerbating or being a contributing cause for depression and anxiety. And this is why we want to do a more thorough search. And then finally, frontal lobe causes. This is at the forefront, actually, of depression and anxiety. One of the most common causes is, say, depression in the frontal lobe. This can be due to spiritual issues. Many people that come into our program, we're actually doing a residential program right now. Not one of the 21 participants rated their spirituality above a 4 or 5 out of 10. Most of them rated themselves 0 or a 1. And there's certain reasons why they got down to that low, but it is important to have a spirituality that can be very helpful. This is the analytical part of the brain, the creative part of the brain. And if we're having a love of learning problem, that can be an issue as well. And of course, music can also help the frontal lobe. The harp music in particular can be very helpful, as well as other types of music. So our goal is to reverse the modifiable causes so that the total causes end up being 3 or less. And the faster the modifiable causes are reversed, the more rapid the remission and even eradication that can occur from depression and anxiety. As mentioned, we authored this 8-week program that's now been run in many countries throughout the world on 5 different continents now. And our 8-week program is run in a lot of Seventh-day Adventist churches. Also, the LDS church has picked it up significantly. We have a lot of LDS people that even go through our residential program, because if they don't respond to the community program, they're often referred here. It's also been run in a lot of Baptist churches and non-denominational churches. And I also know Catholic churches who have run the program, as well as it being run in mental health clinics as well. Although it's just an 8-week program where you meet once a week for 8 weeks, the results continue to produce improvement up to 20 weeks. And as you stay on the things that will help your mental health, those results can actually last a lifetime. There have been over 7,500 people who, on all of these continents that have gone through the program. And the response rate is over 85%. Notice the difference between pharmaceutical response and the response of mental health education. 85% for both depression and anxiety. The studies show a marked reduction in suicidal thoughts by being educated and applying that education, marked improvement in emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence will go up an average of a standard deviation or more in those who go through this, which not only helps, this is not just depression and anxiety, this is actually helping them to reach the highest levels of success and fulfillment. Of course, the group approach is used, but there's also an individualized approach, because included in the program is the DAT test, which actually helps individuals to know their hit list, or the categories of cause involved that they can work on. And this cost is also the lowest cost treatment available for depression and anxiety. And it can be used in conjunction with medicine or without medicine. It doesn't have to be only the non-medication people. It actually helps people with medicines tremendously as well. It's also been the most studied, over 30 studies and abstracts published in peer-reviewed publications on this program, with about 20 more in the pipeline. And the results, a little less than half, just by going through the program, will actually have eradication of their depression and anxiety, about 47%, and you can see the p-value there. But 86% will have a response for depression, 88% in anxiety, and that means a reduction in their scores by over half. And once again, superior to other forms of treatment, and the lowest cost treatment, and the less time, considering that it's only 16 hours. And so it's actually now been the most scientifically studied program for depression and anxiety worldwide. And you can see the list of conditions it helps. premenstrual dysphoric disorder, those who've had head concussions, those who have autoimmune disease, those with all sorts of addictions, including benzo addictions, those who have chronic infections as a source, like Lyme disease, those who have not been on an exercise program or on the standard American diet, it'll help them as well, those who have been abused, even those who have had a stroke or uncontrolled diabetes or poor sleep quality, adverse childhood experiences, inflammation, suicidal thoughts. All of those have been studied in conjunction with the program, showing significant benefit. And of course, the emotional intelligence goes up as well. The reason why it's important to have a low-cost approach that doesn't take a lot of time is because the cost of depression itself is significant. 7 fewer weeks of work per year if you still maintain a job, and a loss of at least 20% in lifetime income, and a lifetime loss for each family who has a depressed family or anxiety member family of $300,000 per family. So a lot of people say, well, you know, we can't afford this very low-cost program, but actually in reality, they can't afford not to do the program. It would be an investment that would be significantly repaid. So how could you put on a program in your community? You could, of course, take the Training the Trainer course. That can be online or in person. We hold it at Weimar several times a year, or we could hold it in your local lake region if we had enough people, about 50 people willing to take it. You can also find out more about online approaches at our Nedley Health site. And these are different websites that you could learn more about it as well. But I would encourage you, we've had, although the reason for the program was to help people's health, we've now had thousands of individuals join the Seventh-day Adventist Church whose first introduction to the church was a depression and anxiety recovery program. And it turns out to be one of the lowest cost forms of evangelism as well. And these are individuals that would be great to have in your churches because they can help others with mental health conditions as well. And they tend to, as a result of improving, be more naturally empathetic and to be great church members as well. So this is, of course, dedicated to your happiness and the happiness of the Lake Region Conference. And I'd be glad to open it up. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. We were hoping to end at about 1:35 or 40, but with the technical difficulties, I'm still willing to take a few questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. Netley, for the presentation. And please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat. I have a few questions. So I know you talked about this a little bit, but could you just give us a few examples in a few areas of the 8 laws of health that people could, just practical approaches that people could use to help improve their depression or anxiety, such as, you know, foods to eat, foods to avoid, how much exercise they should engage in, sleep. Can you comment on a few of those things?
Sure. So in regards to diet, there are several things from the dietary standpoint that have been shown to have significant benefit. We mentioned tryptophan. Also, to methylate, we need to have methionine. And methionine will actually help us make S-adenosylmethionine. And so the foods that are highest in methionine, that are nuts and seeds, are Brazil nuts. Just 6 Brazil nuts would give you half of the amount of methionine you need in a day. Hemp seeds are also a good source, as well as pumpkin seeds, tahini, and chia. Also, L-methionine is present in soy. It's in tofu. It's also very high in wheat. It's one of the reasons why some people who are on a gluten-free diet seem to need to eat meat in order to feel better, because they're actually short in methionine, and they didn't realize that they were an undermethylator. They actually don't need to eat meat. They just need to get L-methionine from another source if it's not going to be from wheat. But wheat is one of the highest sources out there for methionine. Edamame is a good source as well, as are navy beans and kidney beans. And so those are a few simple dietary things that can be helpful. In addition, I mentioned zinc. Zinc has been shown in 2 weeks of getting zinc supplementation, it actually increases your serotonin receptors and improves some of the ADHD symptoms. And the foods highest in zinc are actually cashews, pine nuts, pumpkin seeds. Oats are also an excellent source of zinc, as are hemp seeds. And baked beans are an excellent source, as adzuka beans are. Even tofu and lentils are a good source. And then finally, on diet, there's a lot more we could go into, but magnesium is very important. Magnesium helps us with the methylation process that can augment all 3 neurotransmitters we talked about, plus a fourth we didn't, called GABA aminobutyric acid. And magnesium is present in vegetables in the highest amount in spinach, and Swiss chard. And in seeds and nuts, it's present in flaxseed and, once again, hemp seed. And in legumes, it's highest in edamame and catjang beans. And in grains, it's highest in buckwheat and in oats. These high magnesium foods can be pretty dramatic in regards to improvement. Light therapy, we recommend light, particularly in the morning. That is something apart from nutrition that can significantly has been shown to improve mood, social interaction, and serotonin synthesis. And as far as how much exercise we need, studies show the more the better. But particularly if you're trying to recover from depression, we would want you to work up of doing 4 miles a day of run walk. And so that could be an hour. If you're walking briskly, that's 60 minutes a day. But that's been shown to be very powerful in helping to build up our receptors and even help our production as well of different neurotransmitters.
Someone asked in the chat, spelt flour. Can you substitute that for wheat? Does it have the same nutritional value for mental health?
Yeah, spelt as far as methionine content. Let me go back. I'm sorry that you cannot see my screen, but I do have a list of the grains that are high in it. And spelt, it turns out, is not high on the list as far as methionine is concerned. So teff is actually better. Teff is another grain, TEFF, that it doesn't have as much as wheat. Wheat is the number one as far as grain is concerned. And it may be one of the reasons why, Christ called himself the bread of life, the advantages of wheat if we're not sensitive to it.
Right. Someone said, is bike riding useful, or do you need the impact from foot to ground?
Bike riding is useful. As far as mental health is concerned, bike riding is virtually as good as running or walking. The impact from foot to ground is going to help with your bone health, osteoporosis, a little more than biking will. But if you have arthritis, biking is something you can do. The foot to ground can actually cause wear and tear arthritis to be worse. And so we would recommend bicycling in that case. It's the aerobic type of exercise that helps.
Right. Now, what about sleep and its importance in mental health?
Sleep is important, and the first therapy we utilize for those that are not sleeping well is early to bed, early to rise, and waking up with light therapy. If it's in the wintertime, this time of year, you can wake up. In most places, it's light at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you can get out at 6 a.m. and get that light. But if you get that light every morning at 6 a.m. or 5:30 in the morning, same time every day, within 1 week, your circadian rhythm can be reset. We do often use, and in our program, we'll use certain herbal therapies. There's a combination that we have found very helpful, utilizing hops and theanine and ornithine as well as magnolia, and a little bit of melatonin with it that doesn't have any hook. There's no dependency, and it can work better than medications even for sleep. But normally people only need to take that short term until their circadian rhythms adjust over, or they're working on the other things to help with their anxiety so that they can sleep better. But sleep is important. We recommend, depending on the individual, between 6 and 9 hours a day. The average person needs about 7 hours and 30 minutes a day of sleep.
Okay, thank you for that information. You mentioned earlier about, let me ask this question before that answer. Someone asked, how many Brazil nuts are too many?
Well, nuts are nature's most caloric dense food. So I guess it would depend on what your body mass index is. If you're very thin and have a lean body mass index, then you can eat more nuts. But for those that are more overweight, normally we wouldn't recommend more than 6 Brazil nuts a day. That would be maximum unless you're quite lean.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier about ADHD, and we see, I know in my practice, I definitely see on the rise behavioral problems in children. How is that connected to diet?
So ADHD is connected because often ADHD, you have too much norepinephrine and not enough dopamine, and that balance can be corrected by more B vitamins and particularly zinc. This is why zinc has been shown to be helpful for ADHD. And some of the symptoms of ADHD can also be improved with omega-3 fatty acids. We also know that sugar, it's interesting because some of the studies showed sugar was not a factor, but that's when they used aspartame as a placebo. And it actually seems to be the sugary taste itself that can worsen ADHD. And so this is why it's best to get on natural foods that are naturally sweet and not putting a lot of sugar in the diet. And of course, bursts of exercise are also very important for ADHD. And taking frequent exercise breaks can really help with the refocus.
Right. What about screen time?
Screen time is also very much an issue for ADHD. Actually, screen time causes ADHD because it drives us for distraction. Because when we're on a screen, we'll get a push notification. We will have some sort of intrusive email come in or whatever. And so when people are on screens these days, they're constantly redirecting their focus, which actually shrinks an area of their frontal lobe called the anterior cingulate gyrus, which is precisely the area that we need to manage our emotions and to help us with our working memory, which is the challenge for ADHD. So really, if we're really wanting to get to the best results for ADHD, we need to talk about an electronic fast. And there's been a lot of studies showing it dramatically improves ADHD of just 4 to 6 weeks of an electronic fast where there's no screens involved can be very significant.
Thanks. Just a few more questions here. What about the selenium in Brazil nuts? Is that something that we need to be worried about?
I'm sorry, there's a train nearby here.
The selenium in Brazil nuts, is that something to be concerned about?
No, selenium is actually an important antioxidant, so we like selenium. Now, if you're going to get a couple thousand micrograms, but 6 Brazil nuts are not going to have an excess in selenium. So we need about 200 micrograms a day for optimal mental health anyways, and so that would be an added benefit.
Great. And how do you know if you're getting enough copper in your diet?
Well, in most people, it's too much copper in their diet. We've noticed in doing these studies. But if you are copper deficient, which is extremely rare. In fact, most of the time when we see copper deficiency, it's from zinc excess, because too much zinc will lower your copper too much. So all they'll need to do is get off their high zinc supplementation, and it will normally self-correct. But copper is present in a lot of seed. I mean, it's present in virtually all of the seeds. It's also present in legumes. It's present in soy as well. Zinc, by the way, is present in all of those things as well. But it can be too much in mushrooms. If you're prone to excess copper and you can't carry it around, we would recommend mushroom-free, not drinking out of copper pipes, and of course, avoiding seaweed, seafood, and even fish.
Okay. How does they're asking, is your program that you do, is it helpful for people with um, gut related increases in autistic characteristics?
We've actually had a number of more highly functioning autistic people go through the program, and it's been shown to be quite beneficial for them in improving their emotional intelligence. In regards to more severe forms of autism, if they're not able to focus or engage or pay attention, then the program is probably not going to be very helpful. But those type of individuals might do better with a medical workup. For instance, we talked about copper. Excess copper seems to be a primary issue in a lot of autism. And this is why zinc can be very helpful in improving some of those symptoms of autism.
Right. Maybe you can, we know you have to go in a minute, but this next question, I kind of want you to combine it with this. Someone's asking how much zinc is too much. And my question is, should people, to add to that, should people be worried about the particular, I know the different minerals and vitamins are important, but how can they just ensure with a healthy diet that they're getting in all these nutrients that they need and they won't be having deficiencies?
Yeah, so most people with a variety of plant-based foods are going to be able to get enough of all of these nutrients. It's when we start restricting greatly the plant-based diet or taking out a whole element, for instance, the paleo diet, you can't eat any grains at all. And you're actually taking huge portions of a staple of a category of food and totally eliminating it. So those are the ones that are going to start having more mental health issues related to diet. But if you have a variety of fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables, you're normally going to be getting enough of all of those nutrients. If you're more on an animal-based diet, you're going to have a hard time getting enough antioxidants. You're going to have a significant issue in many areas. B12 is one of the issues that we're concerned about in people that are plant-based, as well as animal-based, because B12 is not made by animals or plants. It's made by healthy bacteria. And some people don't have the bacterial population to make enough of the B12 in the colon to get it reabsorbed into the distal ileum. And so they can short themselves in that. And so we recommend, B12 is stored for a year, but we recommend that if you are plant-based, just to make sure you know what your B12 level is, make sure your bacteria are making enough. And if not, it's very cheap to take a B12 supplement. But that's the only supplement that a plant-based vegetarian across the board, if they never know what their B12 is, it doesn't hurt to take it. That's the only one that we would recommend, continually. But back to zinc, so you understand, if you look up zinc toxicity, there's a lot of symptoms of zinc toxicity. But it turns out zinc is not like other minerals where we can get toxic on it. The symptoms of zinc toxicity are identical to the symptoms of copper deficiency. And so the actual issue when we're taking too much zinc in is we're going to short ourselves of copper. And so that's important to recognize, that it's not the toxic effects of the zinc itself, it's from the copper deficiency that's causing it. So this is why some individuals that have certain genetic issues, they may need 100 or 200 milligrams of zinc a day to correct a metal metabolism disorder. And for an average person, that would be too much zinc. It would lower their copper down lower. But so there are certain individuals with certain genetic states that might need to actually take it in supplemental form to balance their brain chemistry.
Right. And so what about processed foods? Does that eating more processed foods increase issues with mental illness?
It can, particularly, of course, if they're more of the processed junk foods. You can have processed foods like shredded wheat that, there's no added sodium, and it's still going to have all of your advantages of wheat, for instance. And that wouldn't be a problem. But a lot of processed foods, they're adding in saturated fat, coconut oil, they're adding in dairy fat. They're actually taking away a lot of the antioxidant value of the plants that were used in the processed food. And so, in general, eating food, whole food grown as in the garden, is going to produce the best benefits as far as mental and physical health.
All right, I think I have one other question here. For someone without ADHD who is like, we're doing a lot of remote work, we're doing a lot of Zoom meetings, how does that impact mental health?
It does impact it. It's actually not good for their mental health. We've had so many students just here in the local area have to come see us for mental health issues, and it's due to Zoom. And they're getting totally distracted. They have a class on Zoom, but because of all this push notifications and other things, their minds are constantly having to shift gears, and it plays a toll in their emotional intelligence. And so the quicker we get away from the usual use of screens. Now, there may be certain things where the screen might be useful for a certain project. Even your phone, the phone is one of the worst as far as mental health. And we recommend, if you have a smartphone, you get rid of virtually any app where you can waste time or it gets to be distracting you in the middle of the day, and only have apps there that are going to be useful where you don't get lost in. Maybe your GPS app would be okay. Maybe an app for finding the trails in your local area, alltrails.com. Nobody gets stuck in there. There's not any YouTube videos to redirect your mind in ways that are not healthy for it. And so just having very few apps that are helpful, we can get by with utilizing screens in limited fashions where we don't get stuck having to, or not having to, but so many people are using them 4 to 5 hours a day now. And they have no plan to do that when they get up, but that's just what happens because of the addictive elements that the engineers have invented in regards to these screens to keep you on your screens, which is keeping you away from optimal mental health.
Right. Do you have time for a few more questions?
I'm in the middle of a program here, and I am needed in our residential program here, actually at 2:10, so I'm a little bit behind.
Right. So we know you have to go. What other additional resources can you provide for us?
Well, as far as learning more, of course, we have a book called Depression: The Way Out. We also have a book called The Lost Art of Thinking, which will help a lot on the cognitive behavioral therapy and reframing our thoughts into what's rational and helpful. And then one of the children's books, it's becoming a best seller. We just came out with it at the EQ Summit. It's called Millie and Her Tangled Thoughts. And there's a lot of adults that are loving that because it breaks CBT down to be understood by someone who is 7 or 8 years old. And the pictures in there are very gripping and can help you recognize the association between thoughts and feelings. And it's been a helpful resource. So, and of course, our site, Nedley Health, if you just get on there, we have a lot of different free videos and other things that can be helpful for you to learn more about what we've gone into. We go into a lot more detail on that site called Let's Talk Mental Health. So if you want to learn more about zinc and all of its functions and whether you might need more or any nutrient, tyrosine, tryptophan, you could, there's a lot of free stuff on Nedley Health for that.
So what's that website so I can put it in the chat?
Yeah, so if you Google Let's Talk Mental Health, you'll find it, but also nedleyhealth.com.
Nedleyhealth.com. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to let you go. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes to answer some more of these questions, but thank you so much for joining us today. We thank you for all the information that you have provided to us this afternoon.
You're very welcome. God bless you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So everyone, I see that there are still a few questions in the chat, and so I'm going to try to answer some of those to the best of my ability. Someone asked, is most wheat GMO? And so, it just depends. Right now they have the GMO project where certain companies that are engaged in that will be able to designate whether or not their product is GMO or not. And so you can verify that by the package. I will say earlier this week, it's interesting you brought up that question, that earlier this week, I was talking with a plant scientist and was just telling me that, the only way we're going to know what's in our food is if we grow it ourselves. So I think that we do the best that we can, right? We pray and we leave the rest to God. But we truly try to do the best with what God has given us, with the instructions He has given us in terms of eating more plant foods and then trying to do the best that we can. Is B12 absorption? What is the intrinsic factor relationship to gut bacteria? You need intrinsic factor in order to absorb B12. And in order to that whole absorption process to occur, you need good gut bacteria. And in order for you to have good gut bacteria, you need to be eating foods high in fiber, which the gut bacteria thrive on. So if you eat foods high in fiber, then you'll flourish in the number of gut bacteria you have, and that will help you with the production of intrinsic factor, which is important for B12 absorption. So that's why even people who are not vegetarians can still have B12 deficiency if they're having issues with their gut. Again, I think that's all the questions. Again, I would encourage you guys to go to, I'm going to put it in the chat, neilnetley.com. And I'm sorry, netleyhealth.com. And he said that there's a Let's Talk Mental Health, and so where you can get more information about mental health and zinc and some of the things that he talked about today. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this program today. Please continue to reach out to us at Health Ministry to let us know what topics are of interest to you. Before we go, I just want everyone to see this next program that we're going to be having on June the 12th. We're going to be talking about racism, identity, and the health of Black men. June is Men's Health Month, and we have a great lineup here. We have Dr. Terry Mason, who's going to be coming back as a urologist, who's going to be talking about physical and sexual health of men. We have Dr. Reginald Richardson, who's going to be talking about the emotional aspect of health in men. And we have Pastor Lee, who's going to be helping to moderate with myself. So you do not want to miss that program coming up on June the 12th. It's going to be an exciting program for both men and women. Women can share it with the men in their lives. And so be sure to look out for that information and invite the men to that program coming up on June 12th. Again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you were blessed by the information that was shared. Please take the time to share this broadcast with others who missed it so that they can share in on this helpful information. We thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful, wonderful, and blessed afternoon. Take care.